Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I've got most of the participants on mute, and the panelists and moderator will be on. You'll be able to hear and see them. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat, and when it comes time for the discussion, I will read them off to everyone. Also, as people are coming in, I'll be admitting people to the meeting. So I'm going to take a step back. Also, let me say that in the chat, I've also placed the PowerPoint as a PDF that you'll see today from Carl, and I put the agenda in the meeting chat as well. So that's it from me, Representative Bullock. I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Debbie Ann Page and the Council of State Governments, and particularly our Council on Communities of Color of the Council of State Governments for organizing today's Zoom meeting. This originated from a conversation that Debbie Ann and I had at the Council of State Governments National Convention back in December, where we were talking about some of the challenges and opportunities to change legislation to remove barriers for natural hair braiders, particularly here in Pennsylvania. And she shared with me some of the success and challenges of other states, in particular with Rep. Anastasia Williams, which I'm happy to have with us this afternoon. And so we were hoping to bring you all to Harrisburg and have a nice lunch, but there are other circumstances that requires us to Zoom today. So welcome to your fourth Zoom meeting of the day, which I'm sure we have many on our schedule. And so here in Pennsylvania, where we have moved towards a change in natural hair braiding back in 2006. My colleague, Representative Youngblood, worked very actively on legislation at that time, and there was a bill passed in the Senate and then made its way through to the governor's desk that created a specialty license here in Pennsylvania for natural hair braiders, which at the time did reduce the number of hours that they would required to do in comparative to a full cosmetology license. But there were still a lot of concerns from the hair braiding community about the cost that was involved and the time that was involved to obtain their license. But on the other hand, many of our cosmetology industry had concerns around proper training, had concerns around sanitation and hygiene issues. And so this was a battle that continued and continues on even today as we determine or try to figure out the best way to regulate natural hair braiders and easing those costs and burdens at the same time. Last year, or maybe 2 years ago, our governor had a task force that was looking at occupational licenses, and there was a recommendation to remove the natural hair braider license requirement. Our Senator Anthony Williams, began that conversation and introduced legislation in 2019 and began to have several roundtables and conversations with our hair salons and hair braiding community to flush some of this out and to come to some agreement. He is working on that bill, and at the same time, and shortly thereafter, I began to have conversations with the hair braiding community here in Philadelphia and their advocates at Community Legal Services in regards to similar legislation here in the House of Representatives. That being said, we understand that there are still a lot of competing interests and confusion on how we can best go about this in a way to protect the public, to promote the natural hair braiding industry and remove barriers while ensuring safety is at the same time. So I want to thank everyone who has played a part, the staff here in Pennsylvania who have worked on this legislation, my colleagues, both Representative Youngblood and Senator Anthony Williams, for working on this legislation for many years before I came to the House, and our governor for understanding the need to remove obstacles that are preventing people from pursuing their professions and putting food on the table, honestly. And so with that being said, I'm honored to have the support of Council of State Governments, and we can sit and compare legislation across states and share your success and hopefully find ways to make that work here in Pennsylvania. So without further ado, I look forward to hearing from Carl, and I'm going to pull up his bio real quick. Carl is a senior analyst at the Council of State Governments Center for Innovation. Carl supports CSG's work on occupational licensing policy by providing state research, legislative testimony, seminar planning, stakeholder facilitation, and consensus building services. Carl received his Bachelor of Science degree from Kentucky Wesleyan College and a Master of Public Administration from the University of Kentucky. Carl, thank you for joining us this afternoon, and I look forward to hearing your remarks and seeing your presentation.
Thank you very much, Representative Bullock. I'm really happy to be here today and be able to discuss this issue and how it plays larger into occupational licensing policy in general. So we have the PowerPoint that I believe Debbie will have up here momentarily. And there it is. So we can move on to the next slide. So like I said, the issue of hair braider licensure is one that has been a hot topic over the past few years, and CSG has been engaged with occupational licensure policy and assisting states assess their current licensing policies and identifying ways to reduce burdens that may be imposed on the workforce while still protecting public health and safety. So really, hair braider licensure is that topic that gets brought up a lot because it is a microcosmic look at the issue at large. So I wanted to begin today by just talking about licensure in general, and then moving on how this applies to hair braiding licensing, and then some state trends that we've seen over the past few years, and those particular to the Northeast region. So we know licensure serves as a way to protect public health and safety by establishing minimum competencies that address the specific risks that are inherent with the profession. And licensure also provides a system and means to adjudicate cases of alleged malpractice as well. However, this system does not come without also negative effects on the workforce and the economy. So this can include increased costs to the consumer and also lower employment levels for licensed occupations and professions. And then further, these effects and other barriers are magnified for certain population groups, including military spouses, individuals with criminal records, immigrants, and the long-term unemployed and dislocated workers. So knowing these trade-offs, states have been very proactive over the past few years in seeking ways to reform their licensure regulations to mitigate those negative effects, while still safeguarding public health and safety. And from this, two key strategies of these state reform efforts really come to light, and that's being able to identify regulations that may be considered overly burdensome by the state, and also finding ways to improve licensure portability. So to speak briefly about those two things, when assessing state policy on occupational licensing, states are often tasked with finding if the amount of regulation really fits with that associated public health and safety risks that are inherent with that profession. So an important step in doing this is to compare that the state's current regulations with other state practices, so they can find out, are the specific training or education requirements or fees disproportionate when compared to their neighboring states or across the nation. So these comparisons serve as a great way for states to identify specific requirements that are maybe outliers and could require further investigation to see if they could be considered overly burdensome by the state. Further, states are concerned with facilitating the portability of licenses, and certain policy mechanisms can help assist this, notably interstate compacts, licensure by endorsement models, and reciprocity agreements. They help facilitate the movement of licensed professionals across state lines. And further, licensure portability can be aided by states that share streamlined requirements. So for example, some states stipulate in a licensure by endorsement model that someone may receive endorsement of their out-of-state license if they met requirements that are equal or greater than their state that they're locating in. However, in cases where states have much higher than average requirements, there can be greater restrictions imposed on that relocating worker without other policy provisions in place, such as work experience waivers or consideration of whether those requirements within that state may be overly burdensome. So let's move on to the next slide. So in taking a look at what this means for hair braiding licensing, So many states have recognized that their previous hair braider regulations were overly burdensome to the actual risk of public health and safety, and have looked at how other states have regulated or changed regulations for hair braiders while still maintaining public health and safety standards. This comes from knowing that professionals who may have just wanted to practice hair braiding may have also been subject to many more hours of training and money spent learning services that they did not plan on providing through a cosmetology license pathway. So for the states that previously required a cosmetology or hair braider license, there have been two main corrective actions taken, and that have been eliminating the licensure requirement completely or establishing those limited or specialty licenses. So here you'll see what the current landscape looks like across the states with how they license or don't license hair braiders. 27 exempt them completely from licensure, with 16 having done so since 2014. 16 states currently require that limited license for hair braiders, and to define limited licensure, what we mean is that there's a license in place that has a narrower scope and set of requirements than what that quote-unquote parent occupation might be. So in this case, cosmetology or hairdresser licensing. And then 7 states still require a cosmetology or hairdresser license to practice hair braiding. Let's go to the next slide. Here is a breakdown of a comparison between the 7 states and the averages for those that require a full cosmetology or hairdresser license versus those states that require a limited license. So you can see, using the metric of an hours training requirement, the differences that can mean when having that specialty license that's more narrow in focus to that occupation. And you can see the ranges there from a minimum of 1,000 to 1,600 hours for that full license, and then from 0 hours for a limited license being the minimum across states, and 500 being the max. And for those states that don't have a set standard for hours required, there can still be protections in place, such as having to take some sort of safety exam in order to receive that limited license. It's also important to note that this information here doesn't fully capture the cost of licensure. So you have to think also about licensing fees, the cost of training or education to attain those number of hours required, and also the loss of earning potential that can occur during that time getting training. Also, like I mentioned with the limited license, exam requirements are typically accompanied for both those full and limited licensure models. However, 3 states do not require the practitioner to take an exam to receive that limited licensure. Let's go to the next slide.
Uh-oh, hold on. Yikes. Hold on. Okay.
Here you'll see the makeup of the Northeast region and the different types of licensure models that those states employ. So there in the yellow, you see the states that don't require a license for hair braiders, and then the ones in that orange peach color being New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey currently have that limited license that's required for hair braiders. And then in the purple, we have Massachusetts being the one state in Northeast region that does require a cosmetology license to practice. Next slide, please. So looking at the Northeastern states that do require some type of licensure, here again, we're using the metric of hours training requirement, where Massachusetts, again, having to have that full license of cosmetology, have to have 1,000 hours to achieve that license, where the 3 states with the limited licensure or specialty license ranging from 50 to 300. Next slide, please. I next want to talk about some recent legislation found in Northeastern states that have taken action on this particular issue. So here you see 4 states with legislation recently introduced and passed. Maine and Rhode Island 2019 exempted hair braiders from licensure, and we're fortunate enough to have Representative Williams with us here today to talk about their journey in going through that process and getting House Bill 567 passed in 2019. We also have New Hampshire and Delaware in 2017 and 2016, respectively, also having exempted hair braiders from licensure. Next slide, please. And then lastly, I want to leave you with some other state efforts, both to limit licensure for hair braiders and then exempt. So we have here in New Jersey, in 2018, and this legislation was passed that created that limited licensure requiring those 50 hours to receive that license. And then Massachusetts and Pennsylvania in 2019, as Representative Bullock was talking about Pennsylvania's efforts, that legislation introduced to exempt hair braiders from licensure. Next slide. So there is my contact information. We'll have that Q&A at the end of this this meeting. So I'd be happy to answer any questions then, but there is my contact information if you'd like to reach out, and if you need any further information or anything we can do for you here at the Council of State Governments. Also, there is a link to our project webpage where we have different resources and policy materials regarding occupational licensing policy. So really happy to be with you all here today and look forward to hearing from Representative Williams. Thank you.
Representative Bullock, would you introduce Representative Williams, please? Uh-oh. Are you on mute? Hold on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I was talking, I guess you couldn't hear me. First, I want to say thank you again to Carl for that review of state licensure in the Northeast region for hair braiders. And I also wanted to thank the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus leadership, Steve Kinsey and his staff person, Janae Chanel, as well as our House Professional Licensure Committee for promoting today's Zoom meeting to their members so that we can all participate. It's now my honor to introduce Representative Anastasia Williams from Rhode Island. She represents District 9 in Providence. She has served her district since first being elected in November 1992. She is the chairwoman of the House Committee on Labor and is also a member of the House Committee on Oversight and House Committee on Rules. She co-sponsored legislation 2019 H5677A, 2019 S0260A, and passed as a result of a 4-year effort to recognize natural hair braiding as a safe, natural, cultural practice distinct from hairdressing and barbering, which requires licensing due to their use of chemicals and sharp instruments. Representative Williams is a coordinator at First Source Providence. She has been involved in a number of organizations and causes in her community. And I have to tell you, I took a real quick Google of this sister, and I saw her on a House floor back in February, and she is fire, and I ain't mad at you, Representative Williams, for standing up for yourself. And I look forward to hearing from you as well. Thank you for joining us and sharing your experiences.
Thank you very, very much, Representative Bullock. It's a pleasure and an honor. My only, I won't call it a regret, but disappointment is that we couldn't all be in the same room together. But I am truly looking forward to being able to achieve that opportunity soon with everyone. It is a bittersweet kind of struggle with regards to the hair braiding bill that I sponsored. First and foremost, I didn't expect it to take as long as it did to pass. And further, I did not expect the bogus excuses for which was presented to have been brought to the table publicly to keep us in bondage, as I would call it. You know, 74 years has been a long time for something as simple as this. But that bill 5677 was the effort of community grassroots involvement. And I say that because Dr. Ruth Simmons, more than 10 years ago, had come to Rhode Island. She was the president of Brown University for a few years. And she said to me, if the community is not involved, they don't want it. and you can't force them to want it, and you can't force them to take part. And it wasn't until 2 years ago that that statement resonated with me. It took root and it started to show. I started to better understand what the meaning was. The struggle with regards to 5677 boiled down to knowing who the lobbyists are in the opposing side and how strong of a lobbyist they are, how much energy. But equally as important was the participation from the hair braiders and salons themselves. The beneficiaries for this bill was the cosmetology school, first and foremost. It was not about the hair braiders. Clearly the bill, when it was drafted back in 1929, was solely about hairdressers, chemicals, and cutting and so forth. But because hair braiding has become a multi-billion industry, it was so perfectly and conveniently a tool to be utilized against individuals who have practiced, continue to have salons that do hair braiding, that specializes in hair braiding. But for people of color, that's part of our culture. It wasn't a business. It was a tool that was provided to us when our ancestors was out there picking cotton in the blazing sun. We had to come up with innovative ideas on how to maintain our hygiene throughout the years, because we were dressed in the same clothes day after day. We weren't allowed to shower as frequent as we can these days. So when the opposition kept bringing to me that, they need to, they have to, they must take our cosmetology classes in order to be taught about sanitation, it was an insult to the injury that they were causing to our community. So the law stated that anyone who would practice hair braiding, whether in your home, whether in your salon, wherever, you would need to gain 1,700 hours of training, meaning you had to sign up, go to cosmetology school, which started a cost of approximately $17,000 for that course at minimum. That was absurd. And to boot with that, there wasn't anyone in those classes that trained for natural types of hair. And that was not the interest. The main interest we found was signing up, getting approved for that loan, and then you was on your own. Because even after graduating, many of our folks signed up, and till this day are still paying those student loans, were not assisted in obtaining any type of employment in any salons. Didn't get any training, any better training that we already had. I myself learned about hair braiding as a kid. I corn braid, and I do an excellent job at it. But as far as cleanliness, sanitation, as they felt that and presented that was a reason why we needed to go to cosmetology school, the argument was we need to be taught to be able to differentiate the difference between dandruff and ringworm. I mean, it was one insult after another. So I stopped for a second because I have an alter ego by the name of Shanae that often likes to take over, and I let her. It was so insulting. One moves and the other one doesn't. So our hair, because of the different types of hair grease we use, don't often get subjected to lice. So, but they don't know that, and they didn't care to know that. So when that argument was left, it was, here we go. What is it? Well, you need to know about not utilizing the same comb with the same another person and so forth. You know, it was like almost as to say we didn't have enough intelligence. But the caveat to all this is the Institute of Justice, a woman by the name of Christina Walsh, stepped in to assist us. And it was no holds barred. They started at 1,700 hours for us to take for training. I objected to that, so the bill went for further study the first year. The second year, it went from 1,700 hours to 1,500 hours. What's that? So finally, it was like, you know, they started attacking my person, me. Coming up with I attacked someone, I physically attacked someone, I threatened someone's life, you know, because they saw that their argument was not sticking. It was conveniently always passed for the 4 years it passed in the House side, but the Senate was the holdup, unfortunately. But that's when we started checking out the behind scene. And that's why I said to you all, you need to check to see whatever lobbyist is working for on behalf of the opposition, you need to find out their games. Be as strategic as they. You also need to be able to engage the individuals who will be benefiting. Your blood, sweat, and tears, your effort will be a success with the support of all these beneficiaries. Oftentimes, I find that they're interested and concerned, but they're not motivated as much as they should. So finally, in the third year, we were negotiating with regards to how many hours from the 15 hours that would be approved would be fair. As far as I'm concerned, 0 hours would be fair, simply because this is a culture thing. And they fought me on that for a couple of years, so finally, 2019, they agreed if I would agree to 200 hours, they would pass the bill on the Senate. I told them 200 hours was still too many. And they said, okay, we'll probably have to come back next year. But at the 11th and 3/4 hour, I was asked if I would agree to a fine instead of the 200 hours. And the fine pretty much stated that in order for, if anyone violated the regulations, at which the language stated something with regards to, we always said that hair braiding does not, you don't utilize scissors, you don't utilize chemicals, any of those types of things. They said if we were found to utilize any of those things, it would be a violation of what we presented. And surely I knew we weren't going to use them, so I agreed. So the fine ranges from $50 first offense to $150 for numerous others after that. So it agreed, and finally it passed. But I'll tell you something. The struggle for this bill's passage was real and intense. I learned that it wasn't about the benefits of the folks whom would be harmed by it staying in place, but it was about the Benjamins, for those who were benefiting from the top first and foremost. And I don't begrudge anyone making money. I begrudge the manner in which they go about doing it and the population that they utilize to benefit from. So I wasn't giving up on this, and I say to you all, don't give up on this. If you have not had any engagement with the Institute of Justice, I would suggest you call them, make contact with them. Christina Walsh is the one who was extremely helpful with us. She was very good. Participation with regards to even going to the opposition and have them come and we braid their hair, which was not natural hair braiding. Here in Rhode Island, we don't have those individuals in the Senate to have, you know, we don't have many minority people of color in the House or the Senate. We are a body of 113 combined, and trust me, we're not the majority. So I would just say participation. This is a no-brainer, and stick to it. I'm with you 100% in any way I can be helpful, but don't give up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Thank you, Representative Williams, for your remarks and for sharing your story and experiences in your state. In the 4 years that it took for you to get this legislation passed, I'm optimistic and hopeful that we don't take as long. I am grateful for your time and for you sharing your experience. We actually do have some representatives from IFJ on the call, Lee McGrath and Jessica Gandy, I believe. So I want to thank them for joining us and working with me here in Pennsylvania as well, with our legal counsel that's been representing some of the hair braiders at Community Legal Services. My colleague, Senator Anthony Williams, is on the call, and I wanted to give him an opportunity to say anything briefly if he would like to. Senator Williams, are you there? Senator Williams?
He's unmuted. I don't know why
He may have stepped away from the call, but Senator Williams, if you come back and you want to say a few words and share the work you've done in the Senate here in Pennsylvania on this legislation, I do welcome you to do so. At this time, I will allow for a few questions. I know very briefly, I just wanted to share a few stories that I've heard of hair braiders paying, you know, upwards of $15,000 or more to receive their license here in Pennsylvania. Confusion with the cosmetology schools over what is required for the specialty license, or even them saying that they don't offer the specialty license hours, the limited hours, so you have to do the full cosmetology course. And so they've been kind of hamstringing these braiders into going through the hassle and the time and the cost of getting a full cosmetology license when it's not necessary. And then, you know, getting to the point where they're ready to take a test, or getting to the point where even in the school, the teachers are asking them to teach the rest of the class how to braid because they don't know how to braid. And then not offering those courses in different languages. As you know, many of our natural hair braiders may speak French or other languages, and they're not offered those courses in those languages or offered the test in those languages as well. So they are, it's a hardship to say the least for them to get through those courses and to obtain their license here in Pennsylvania. With that being said, if there are any questions, we will open up the floor for questions.
I love your brand.
Okay, is Karen, did you have any questions from Karen from Representative Youngblood's office?
Wait.
Oh,
Oh,
I think she's shushing a baby.
I'm sorry, I'm shushing a baby. I'm so sorry. It's nap time, I apologize. I'm sorry, no, I don't. The only question I had was, sorry, that's my 6-year-old. The only question I had was, will the PowerPoint be available? I think someone said that it would be because the information is outstanding.
Yes.
So I'm really, thank you, Mr. Sims, for the information. So I'm really excited to have that at our disposal moving forward because it's great. So, and thank you for doing this. I apologize that it's 1 o'clock at nap time and I'm nursing a baby to sleep.
That's okay. Thank you, Karen. So
Thank
yes,
you.
we are recording this this Zoom event, and I'll make sure I'll talk to Debbie about making that available to our members here in Pennsylvania, as well as the PowerPoint from Carl.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Comments?
Representative Bullock, it's Lee McGrath from the Institute for Justice. Great to see you again.
Good to see you as well, Lee.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Representative Williams for her kind comments about my colleague, Christina Walsh at the Institute for Justice. I can tell you, Representative Bullock, that your observations about fire underestimated Representative Williams and the passion that she had for this issue. I'll include my contact information in the chat box at IJ, but we welcome the opportunity to continue to work with you, Representative Bullock, and others, and replicate what Representative Williams did in Rhode Island. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. I see in the chat that we have a question. What is a limited license? Carl, did you want to take that question up?
Sure. By limited license, also known as a specialty license, what we're referring to is a license with a narrower scope of practice defined and less requirements that are needed to receive that license than a parent occupation, whatever that parent occupation might be, quote unquote. So for hair braiders, coming from the cosmetology profession, so it's narrowing what they can do in comparison to fully licensed cosmetologists to just natural hair braiding. And so with that comes that narrow scope of practice that they're allowed to do with that license, and then the requirements that are just pertaining to the practice of that.
Thank you, Carl. So in the case of a hair braider, instead of getting a full cosmetology license, you would have a specific license for natural hair braiding. That will be the limited license. Any other questions in the chat group, or did anyone want to jump in? Okay. If not, I would like to again thank Debbie and the staff at Council for State Governments, the Honorable Representative Anastasia Williams for joining us this afternoon, for all of the members of the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus. I see also my colleague Carol Hill Evans, who, as our secretary, has joined us, and the staff and members of the Pennsylvania House and Senate, and particularly our Professional Licensure Committee, for joining us today. I wish everyone a pleasant afternoon, and hopefully we'll all see each other in person real soon. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.